Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you very much. I'm sure we all enjoyed the beautiful piece of work done by Jumoke. Yeah, it's on. So I'm going to ask Jumoke three questions. Then I will leave the rest of the questions to the audience to ask. Personally, I feel this is a very rich body of work when it comes to not just the history of LCCI, but the history of Nigeria. We see quite a lot of archival materials, which is, I'm an archivist and a curator, so looking through what she's done, it is an impressive body of work. I'm going to ask you one question. Why formation? Why taking on this task of creating this beautiful body of work?
Thank you very much, Damola. I think formation came about in a very
Hello, please, can we have one house, please? Hello, thank you. Please.
in a very serendipitous way, you know. So I was approached by Mrs. Toki Babugunje, who at the time had just been appointed as the third female president in the history of LCCI. So she approached me and she told me about a photographer who had been documenting LCI for the last, I think, 40, 45 years. And she told me that it would be interesting for me to meet the person and see what we could do with the photographer's archive. So I was very excited for two reasons. One, also a storyteller. I use photography as well as a medium. Secondly, we had worked on an archiving structures workshop earlier on, which we did in collaboration with the Aga Khan Institute of the MIT. And at the time, we were talking about what to do with archives. You know, how do we make archives more accessible to a wider audience? So we started thinking about storytelling and ways to present, you know, archives in a way that is more digestible to a wider audience. So we came off all of that, and that was how. So when she approached me, I was very much interested in meeting Chief Sunday Ojuri, who was the photographer at the time. So I called him immediately and I scheduled an appointment that I have to come to see you. He told me that, you know, a lot of the negatives had gone bad, you know, and all of that, but we should try and see what we could do to salvage, you know, his archive. And the next call that I got, and then COVID happened. So this was 2020. Lockdowns began, COVID happened, we were all at home and we didn't know what to do with ourselves. And the next call I received was from Mrs. Mabo Ogunje to inform me that Chief Ojuri had died. And so that created a second layer of urgency, you know, like, okay, this man, he's died with all of that story. Yes, we have access to the archive, what do we do? So we started talking. And Mrs. Mabo Ogunje said we have to think about how to digitize the archive. You know, LCCI has a lot of material that dates back to about 1948, a lot of records, a lot of ledgers, you know, and so on. There's just so much material, so much tangible material. But one thing that struck me was that the tangible material, yes, we already have access to them, but what about the stories, the intangible, the stories that reside in a lot of the people that were associated with LCCI in one form or another? So how do we quickly extract their story? And you know that with COVID-19, there was an urgency at the time. We didn't know if we were going to survive. Nobody knew what was going to happen. So we then decided that it was more important to salvage the stories in the bellies of the elders, you know, that were part of LCCI. And that was how, you know, we started. So we did the first interview with Chief Lawrence Lamidi Shoyombo. Sadly, Chief Shoyombo passed away a couple of days ago. So I want us to observe a minute silence, you know, for Chief Shoyombo. May his dear soul rest in peace. So Chief Shoyoba was the first interview that we conducted, and even though it was right in the middle of the pandemic, he opened his doors to us. I remember then we had to double check, we had to carry sanitizers, double mask, we had to make sure that it was safe, because at that time Chief Shoyoba was already in his 90s. But he was quite open, to receive us, because he also saw the importance of speaking to us and for us to document that story. And then we then proceeded on to meet other members. We conducted a total of 12 interviews with a lot of elders, during the pandemic. But a lot of the work also was done, because the archive is also another layer. It was also a subject in the story as well. We relied, there was a 100-year book that was made when LCCI became 100 years, is 1988. And that publication was also something that was commissioned by Alhaji Salami. I'm sure you saw Alhaji Salami there. He also saw the importance, of doing like a thorough research. And that also became the basis of, the project. Beyond that, we also got our own research, and we dug deep into a lot of archives. Some of them were personal, but then majority of the archive that we dug into was the LCCI archive.
Okay. Awesome. Using archive as a means of storytelling, using archive as a way of furthering and enriching how we tell our story as Nigerians, as Africans, how have you been able to gather all the materials you use in this amazing work? Because I feel like it is important. Nigeria as a country, we are gradually losing our essence because our archives are not in order. The other day, there was a video that was trending on Instagram, on Twitter, about the archive, National Archive in Enugu, and it's in complete shambles. Same thing in Ibadan. God forbid if fire or anything happens to one of those buildings, a chunk of our history is gone already. So how were you able to deal with gathering archive, not just getting the archive, but also the accuracy of this material to verify the images, the licensing? How are you able to do that?
Well, I think the first thing we did was we got a consultant, and that is you, Damola, because you worked extensively with us on this project. And it's also important. So you mentioned the National Archive in Ibadan. I've been there a couple of times, and each time I go in there, I want to weep for this country. At the state, of the archive, it's not being digitized. A lot of the material is literally crumbling in real life, in real time, and it just shows that we have a very strange relationship with history. But I also understand that maybe that also might be a symptom of our history as well, that we're colonized and we don't know what to do with our collective history. So again, maybe that's what's presenting itself. So what we did was that we tried to get as much expertise as possible, because we also need to even understand what we're looking at. So, for example, we got a lot of negatives from Pa Ojuri. A lot of that we used in episode 3, to kind of narrate episode 3. So we got a lot of negatives. We had to identify a lot of the personalities in the negatives. We had to transfer. We did a lot of work in that regard. And then we also did a survey actually with LCCI, where we tried, to catalog, all the material that they have, so that we can then see which one was useful for the film. And we hope, one of the things that we hope is that we're able to actually do a proper digitization project, with all of that material.
I was about asking you, what is the current state of the LCCI archive as of today?
It's there. It's just there. It hasn't been digitized, sadly. It hasn't been digitized. And we're hoping that maybe is something that they would take on, to actually properly digitize them.
If I'm wrong, the organization is 188 years old, right?
No, it's now 138 years old.
138.
Yes,
That's
138.
the 138 of our history when it comes to commerce and
Yes.
economics.
And
in
a lot of
Nigeria.
that history is intertwined with Nigerian history, because a lot of the personalities that were involved with LCCI were also very much involved in the governance of Nigeria as an entity at the time.
All right. Okay. So now the documentary is ready. The doc series. What's next step? Are you planning to have more screenings? Are you planning to take it to schools, secondary school, tertiary institutions? How do you want to use this work of art to not to just inform and educate people, but also cause a change? Because I mean, that's the primary aim of making a film. Use it as a medium to cause a change. What's the next step?
Yeah, so I was speaking to someone earlier on today that when we were growing up, NTA was like our go-to when we wanted, documentaries, when we wanted to watch documentaries. And then when privatization came and they privatized that industry, a lot of the TV channels or TV stations that came out of that period didn't take documentary as one of the mediums that they wanted to showcase. Because when that happened, Nollywood was also taking off, and people were more interested in fiction rather than non-fiction. I guess also the reality of living in the environment didn't allow for a lot of interest in documentaries. So, so now there's a gap, because even when you make documentary films, there's nowhere that is going to end up locally. You don't have anywhere to platform the work locally. So then you are now faced with either taking it, by the time you take it to a lot of film festivals, and then it's traveled, and then it's gone on and on and on, then what next? And a lot of the time, it doesn't really get to the people. People don't get to engage with the work. I mean, film festivals here are kind of like elitist spots, It doesn't get to the market women, it doesn't get to people on the street. So what we want to do with this film is that we want to take it on a tour. So it's going to go on to tertiary institutions and so on, because we really want people to engage with it. And then once we are done with that tour, which would be a nationwide tour, is what we're hoping, fingers crossed, that we're able to achieve that. Then I think the next layer may be then to have, I don't know, maybe NTA might be interested. I'm just being quite nostalgic because that's where we used to watch documentaries when I was growing up, and I'm hoping that maybe it can end up there, in some way.
And hopefully you finally get the LCCI to digitize its archive. And got to more interesting because
I'm about to retire.
Yeah.
I literally went gray working on this.
Most often I know we don't understand the power of history and the power the power this storytelling has in not just informing the next generation but also preserving heritage, preserving our life, and preserving who we are, particularly our identity as Nigerians. Because if we keep up with this nonchalant attitude about, we can just leave it alone, we'll wake up one day and somebody else will practically write our history for us if we are not careful. It is happening now with so much how we twist information with social media. Wake up and they write all sort of nonsense, if I may say, or what's not true. And most times, if you don't have accurate information to back this up, you stand at their mercy, because they can actually say it really happened. So thank you very much, Jumoke. Please, if you have any questions, and we can wrap.
Yeah, I want to say, I just want to introduce. Oh, sorry.
You see, the truth is evergreen. I invited a gentleman here today, and he must be happy. His great-grandfather from the mother side was one of the people who formed Mr. Blaze. His own father was the second president after Eju. you to stand. He's a lawyer. When I joined the chamber as a small boy, I was in that, and Pa Edu used to ask me to carry their walking stick. But small businessman to carry walking stick for them. In 1974. And go to the church, became friends. He's my personal lawyer. Until I got here today and until they got here, we did not know that the Blaze founder in 1888 was a small company.
Richard Bill Blaze.
Yes.
Wow. The radical Richard Bill Blaze.
Yes. So,
wow.
so we got actually to the history.
Wow. I'm going to ask you to say maybe one or two words, but I also want to acknowledge the presence, of the current president, of LCCI, Engineer Leye Kupolui. Thank you very much for being here, sir. And also the immediate past president, Mr. Gabriel Idaosa, who was a huge, huge resource, for the production of this documentary. Thank you so much. And of course, Mrs. Toki Babogunje, who is the third female president in the history of LCCI. 138 years history, there have only been 3 female presidents, and she's the third. And obviously, we have our wonderful DG, Dr. Chinyere Almono, who did all the back end, okay, this is how we talk to this person, this is how we write this is how we do all the administrative, things that we had to do with LCCI. Dr. Almono facilitated that. I also want to acknowledge, Mrs. Sade Benetton Young for being here as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your thank you for joining us, and also being so supportive, words of encouragement. She sends me all the time, Jumoke, you can do this, don't give up, and so on. So thank you so much for all of that. So what Chief, and of course, the chairman of the board of trustees, Chief, please, Chief John Odeyemi. Thank you so much for your support, for all that you did, to ensure, that the documentary came out. It was a huge success. Thank you very much for your support. And I also wanted, so what Chief Odeyemi was trying to say was that we had mentioned Richard Bill Blaze, and he was such a radical personality, he confronted the colonialists head on, and he would write articles in newspaper to criticize a lot of the things going on, at the chamber, and why a lot of Africans need to join the chamber and also participate. Now, we often kind of forget what life must have been like, for merchants as well as businessmen during colonial times, very little access to resources. The banks, as Chief Odeyemi said, were colonial banks. They didn't have access to resources. So they had to do a lot of work to ensure that they were included, and without LCCI, as Chief Sonyoba said, you cannot do business in Lagos. So to now find out that R.B. Blaze was his grandfather, as Chief Toyo as well, who was was actually his father as well. So it's such an amazing story, and I would just like you to say a few words.
Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by saying thank you very much to Chief Odeyemi for very kindly inviting me here. And I learned quite a bit. This film actually opened a very, very interesting window on the economic history of Nigeria. And I really, really learned quite a bit. I'd like to thank you profusely for that. And I heard a lot about R.B. Blaze, Richard Bill Blaze. He died in 2004, well before my time. So I never got the opportunity of meeting him. Well, incidentally, I met my grandfather, who also ran Blaze stores. But once again, I'll stop right here. And then I'll say thank you very much. I think I've had a wonderful evening. It's a welcome change from sitting at home or sitting at the Ikoyi Club. So I'm glad you asked me to come here. Thank you very much.
So do we have questions? Do we have remarks? Do we have observations? Please, anyone? Okay. We'll call it a wrap. Should I? Questions?
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.